and welcome back to She Investigates, the podcast where we investigate all things weird. I'm your host, Gwen Ross, and today we're jumping into part 2. So if you have not listened to our episode from last week about the Ellen Greenberg case, go back and listen to that episode before you listen to this one, or you might be a little bit lost. But I have a ton more information for you on the case this week, and my husband is actually back with me again this week. But before we jump into that, let's catch up. So this week, my 9-year-old daughter had to go to the eye doctor. She took an eye exam at school, and they sent me an email telling me that she did not pass her eye exam. And at first, I kind of thought that she was faking it because she really wants glasses. Like, she had been using blue light glasses, and she really wanted glasses. And another reason why I thought that she was faking it is because it reminded me of when I was in elementary school and I read a book about a girl that got glasses. And ever since I read that book, I just really, really wanted glasses. And so I actually faked needing glasses. And my parents took me to the eye doctor, set up an eye exam and everything. And I tried to fake my way through the eye exam so that I could get glasses. But the eye doctor saw through me and knew that I didn't actually need the glasses. And I ended up costing my parents money, taking me to go get an eye exam. But I thought maybe my daughter's like me and she just really wants glasses and was faking it. But then I took her to her well check and she failed it there as well. So she finally got to go to the eye doctor yesterday. And everybody in the eye doctor's office just thought she was the cutest because she was so excited when she found out that she needed glasses. It was like Christmas morning for her. So we've been having fun picking out glasses and deciding what colors she wants and what frames she wants. And the irony is that she actually has worse eyesight than me. I actually do need glasses now. And now that I actually need them, I rarely wear them. So it's kind of funny that I tried so hard to get them, and now that I have them, the grass is not greener anymore. But anyways, that's been what's going on in our little family this week. And with that, let's jump into today's case. Patrick, welcome back.
Thank you very much. I'm super excited to learn more about this. All week I've been waiting to hear more about this, and she specifically is keeping me in the dark so that there's no spoilers so she can get my unbiased reaction.
I want you to be as invested in this as the listeners are, so I didn't want you to have any spoilers.
I'm invested. I cannot wait to hear this.
Well, I'm going to give just a little quick summary of what happened in the last episode, just to kind of refresh everyone's minds. Basically, Ellen Greenberg was found in her apartment by her fiancé. He had gone to the gym, and when he came back 45 minutes later, he was unable to get into the apartment. He kicked his way in and found her on the floor. She had been stabbed multiple times, and when they did her autopsy, they found that she had been stabbed 10 times in the back of the head. And despite all of this, the medical examiner decided to rule her death a homicide. And
that still boggles my mind. I can't believe that.
I know, it's crazy. But where we last left it is her parents were not just going to take this lying down. They decided, okay, you're done investigating, then we're going to pick up and we're going to start doing our own investigation. And this was not just like a rinky-dink investigation. They hired experts in all of the fields that they wanted to look into in this case. They hired criminologists, forensic specialists, neuropathology experts. Pretty much every expert that they hired in this case to look at it raised concerns about her death being ruled a suicide.
Can you imagine how much that must have cost them?
Oh, we'll get into that. Don't
really?
worry.
Oh,
yes.
Good.
Yes. So they started working with a private investigator named Tom Brennan. And Tom Brennan is the man. He has worked over 800 homicide cases. And he was retired. And so he actually, this just warms my heart. He worked this case completely pro bono with the family. He said, I do not profit off of other people's grief. And that just endeared me to him because he has spent years with this family fighting the fight with them to try to get justice for their daughter.
That sounds like a good
So,
guy.
yeah. And they also started working with a lawyer named Larry Krasner. He will come into play a little bit later. But I want to talk about some of the things that the experts that they hired were finding. So the first expert that they hired was a guy named Cyril Wecht, and he is a renowned forensic pathologist. He reviewed the scene and the autopsy, all of the photographs, and he concluded that it was highly, in his words, highly, highly unlikely that it was a homicide.
He said highly, highly?
Highly, highly.
Highly? Oh, so he is he's not pulling any punches.
Yeah.
I get it. I like it.
Yeah. The second expert they hired was named Scott Illman, and he is an expert in crime scene reconstruction. Ooh. He focused mostly on, like, the blood evidence, and he concluded that based off of the blood patterns, the blood spatter, and I don't know if you remember last time I told you about that dried blood on her face that was running the opposite direction of what it would have been if she really was in the position that she was in when the first responders showed up. And he was able to conclude that her body had absolutely been moved after she died.
Yeah, I remember like watching episodes of like Criminal Minds or like CSI, and I was amazed by how much they can recreate just by blood spatter evidence.
Right.
Like that's nuts.
Okay, the next expert that they hired was Henry Lee, and he is a forensic scientist and biochemist. And he concluded that the number and the type of wounds, as well as the blood spatter, were not consistent with the suicide. So basically, every expert that they are hiring is telling them this does not look like a suicide at all.
Okay, you got to also figure that this coroner that ruled it as suicide, right? Mm-hmm. He's got to know who these people are.
Right.
I know who the other professionals are in my industry. He's got to know who these guys are. And the fact that they're saying something that totally contradicts what he's saying and saying, yeah, you did a bad job, he's got to be feeling like crap.
Yeah. But they also hired Dr. Wayne Ross, who, yeah, probably our distant cousin.
Yeah, totally a cousin, yeah.
He is a forensic pathologist expert, and the stuff that he found was the most interesting to me because we have a lot of documentation from him of what he did. He concluded that some of the wounds on the back of her head could not have been inflicted by her, and the evidence that he has that supports that is they did a complete 3D recreation of all of the stab wounds in her head, showing like the angle and the force that the knife would have to be at in order to make those wounds. Okay, so I talked a little bit about the YouTuber, Gavin Fish, that I've been following for this case. He covered it extensively, and he actually tried to recreate some of these angles that you would have had to be at to actually inflict these wounds on yourself. Him and his wife, she used a ruler that they had marked like where the handle and the blade were, and it was just not biomechanically feasible for her to have even done this. Dr. Ross also said that the bruises that were on Ellen's body were consistent with repeated beatings.
Oh, see, I called that.
Yeah, we talked a little bit last time about it looked like she had maybe been beaten a couple of different times, and the bruises were in different stages of healing. Not only that, she also had some bruising on her neck that is consistent with strangulation. There was some marks on her neck that he attributed to fingernails, potentially like clawing at her neck, trying to get somebody's hand off of your neck. And underneath her neck muscles, there was a large hematoma. And that is also consistent with strangulation. And let me be clear that he's not saying that he thinks that she died by strangulation. He thinks that that was just part of this whole encounter. Oh. That maybe that was how she was subdued or something like that. So the experts also looked at the lock on the door. That was a big piece about this case being ruled a suicide, was that she was alone and that bar lock was locked from the inside. And they concluded that for it to have been kicked in the way that Sam described, at least one end of the lock would have had to have been completely ripped off, either the door or the door frame.
I said that last time.
Yeah.
It just seems so weird that the thing's still on the door, even though he says he, quote unquote, kicked it.
Right. And I did put that picture up on my Instagram last week if you want to go and look at it. But that is another thing that Gavin Fish and his wife recreated, was kicking in a door with that lock on it. So you can go and look at that on his Instagram too. That was super interesting. But at this point, Ellen's parents have been fighting to get her case reexamined for years. And I talked about their lawyer. He actually ends up getting elected as the district attorney for Philadelphia, which sounds like a good thing because he was like fighting for them. But now that he is the district attorney for Philadelphia, he can't just automatically reopen their case because that's a conflict of interest.
Yeah.
So since he was their lawyer, he does the right thing and he sends it up the chain to the Pennsylvania district attorney's office. And that is where Josh Shapiro is the district attorney. And spoiler alert, it's going to sit there for a long time.
It always does.
It just takes forever. There's just so much red tape and it takes forever for anything to get done. So June of 2019, Ellen's family takes all of this evidence that they have collected to the medical examiner's office, Dr. Golino, who is Marlon Osborne's boss, and they petition for them to re-examine the case and the cause of her death and amend the death certificate. And what do you think they said?
They're not giving themselves up. They're not going to say it's a suicide. I bet you anything they're just going to maintain. Oh, yeah, we know better.
Yep, they both refused to reopen the case, even
gosh.
with all of this new evidence from the experts. And so Ellen's parents filed a lawsuit to try to compel them. If you're not going to do it on your own, we're going to try to compel you to consider all of this new evidence and do the right thing, you know?
But what other options are they giving him? They're not giving him any options. That's just, like, my gosh.
Right. And this case, it just drags on and on and on. There's a series of appeals. It's even dismissed at one point. And I'm not going to get into like all of that legal stuff. It just makes its way up through the chain of command. And after years and years, it finally gets to the point where it's waiting to be heard by the Supreme Court. Okay? So, but during the discovery for this trial, while they're preparing for this trial, a lot is discovered. And it's starting to look like this whole thing is a cover-up for the medical examiner's office, the district attorney's office, some of the Philadelphia police officers, that they're covering up evidence that this was a murder.
Oh, yeah.
And I mean, I feel like you're right that they didn't want to have egg all over their face in the public when it came to how bad they all were at their jobs.
And it's not just like somebody's hunch. Like, experts are telling them they did a bad job. And when confronted with those experts, they had to have freaked out.
Right. I mean, they basically did a horrible job preserving the crime scene, preserving the evidence, the medical examiner, their whole secret meeting thing that we talked about. But we're going to look at a couple of the defenses that were used in this lawsuit that's made its way up to the Supreme Court to justify changing the death to a suicide.
I wonder what Sam is doing. Not Sam. Is Sam, right?
Her fiance, yeah,
I wonder
Sam.
what Sam's doing this whole time, too.
Yeah.
Like, you just like, now I'm getting angry at him.
You know, I actually don't know a lot about that. I think he's maybe tried to stay out of the spotlight for a little while.
Yeah, he's not dumb. He's trying to get away with murder. Sorry if you're Sam. Allegedly get away with murder.
But anyways, okay, so Marlon Osborne is told in this secret meeting that the security guard went up with Sam Greenberg and witnessed him break the door down, right?
Wait, is this the secret meeting that they had that we talked about in the first episode?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes, so he meets with some people from the district attorney's office, his boss, some police officers, and they tell him to try to convince him to change from a homicide to a suicide. Look, the security guard went up with him, saw him kick in the door, and Dr. Osborne says that was a big part of why he changed his ruling. He said it gave credibility to Sam's story that somebody else was there to see him have to kick this door in. And that was not true at all.
What?
Phil Hanton was actually the security guard, and he stated that he never accompanied Sam upstairs.
That liar.
And this was corroborated by security footage at the apartment building that the police had at that time. This is not new evidence.
You're kidding me.
They got that video evidence in January of 2011.
And they still went forward with that story?
Yes, and they not only had the security tapes, there is a log showing somebody viewed those videotapes and made a timeline tracking Sam Goldberg's movements on the video. And it proved that nobody ever accompanied him to the apartments, that the security guard never went with him. But this evidence, that was just completely covered up and was not presented to Osborne. He was told something completely different, which severely impacted his decision to change to a suicide.
They were trying to manipulate him, because if you remember, he is first initially leaning towards it being a murder.
Towards it being
right?
a homicide,
but
yes.
that was the one thing. That's the one thing that made him change to a suicide, and it was a lie.
There was one other thing, which he took into consideration.
Oh, okay.
That was the condition of the locked door.
Uh-huh.
Dr. Osborne was told that it was locked and that it had to be broken in, but the condition of the lock was never shown to him. Like the picture that showed that like it wasn't ripped off of its frame or anything.
Well, it's not a body. Why would he look at it? He's just going to trust the cops, yeah?
Right. And not only that, but those locks can actually be really easily manipulated. If you just do like a quick YouTube search, how to get into a sliding bar lock.
Yeah.
Like you can find ways to get in. Actually, the property manager actually told the police that she accidentally in the past had like closed a apartment door too hard behind her, and the bar had like flipped behind her and locked her out. But she had been able to manipulate the lock to get herself back in. So that really didn't prove anything. But that was something that they used to try to get Dr. Osborne on their side.
It really does sound like they're trying to manipulate him.
Well, don't think that Dr. Osborne is a stand-up guy just yet.
Oh, really?
Because do you remember when I told you about Dr. Rourke Adams?
Yeah.
She was a neuropathologist, and Dr. Osborne supposedly took a piece of Ellen's spine for her to examine to see if there was one particular wound that they were wondering if she would have been rendered unable to commit any of the other wounds after that wound happened. Because it did puncture her spinal column.
Yeah.
Well, turns out there is zero paper trail to prove that this examination ever happened. There's no official report. There's no invoice paid to Dr. Rourke Adams. And Dr. Rourke Adams herself says she has no memory of observing the spine. None. So,
oh my gosh.
It kind of seems like maybe Dr. Osborne made that up to make the case look a little bit stronger for suicide.
I'm getting JFK assassination vibes out of this. Like, that is nuts. They're like, okay, in that instance, withholding information from the pathologist is just as good as lying. But now we are straight up lying about things happening.
Well, and it turns out that Dr. Osborne's boss, Dr. Galino, he actually was a little bit suspicious that this had never taken place as well.
Really?
So in 2019, luckily that piece of her spine had been preserved. And in 2019, he takes it to another neuropathologist named Dr. Emery.
I hope they're recording what's happening.
Who she wasn't on the staff in 2011 when the death occurred, but he takes it to her and he asks her to more thoroughly examine it, like under a microscope. Do a better job than this like curbside examination that was done before. And she determined that Ellen was actually dead when that stab wound occurred. And that's because there was no evidence of a hemorrhage and no evidence of vital response to that cut. So in other words, her blood wasn't pumping anymore when that cut took place, so her body had no response to that cut even happening.
My jaw is on the flippin' floor.
So that, and if you remember, that was not the last cut in her body. She had that final stab to the heart.
Yeah.
Which, that in and of itself proves that Ellen couldn't have done that to herself. If she was dead when the stab in the neck happened, she was obviously still dead when the stab to the heart happened.
Why are they covering? This isn't obvious. Why are they doing this?
And Dr. Wayne Ross, who the Greenbergs had hired, he also agreed with Dr. Emery that had happened after her death.
Oh.
So she tells Dr. Galino about her findings, and what does he do with that information? Nothing. And he tells her not to make an official report of this, and still refuses to change Ellen's cause of death. It's like these people were determined not to have to say, we were wrong, we did a bad job, we need to fix this. They just proceeded to cover up and cover up and cover up.
My goodness. It just feels like this all started by A shoddy police investigation. The police commissioner knows this was a bad investigation. He's putting pressure on everybody else, and they're just trying to tell lie after lie after lie after lie to try to make it all fit. This is just terrible.
It is. And the final piece is that Ellen's psychiatrist, one of the things that they pointed to say that it was a suicide was the medications that she was on.
Because everybody who's on anxiety medication must be suicidal.
Yeah. But
sarcastically, guys, come on.
Ellen's psychiatrist said she never saw any signs of Ellen being suicidal. She never talked about it. She'd actually even written in her notes that Ellen seemed to be doing much better.
Yeah.
So really nothing in this investigation that I've seen has pointed to suicide at all.
Well, didn't Ellen herself say that she was doing better in like text messages and stuff?
Yes.
Yeah.
So now all of this information has come out in the course of preparing for their first lawsuit. But now they're coming with a second lawsuit. And this lawsuit is to prove that there was a cover-up. They're not giving these people a pass.
Yeah.
Like, they're like, no, we're going to prove that you covered all of this up.
Yeah, they're no longer in the business of just proving it was a murder and trying to get justice. Now they're trying to hold people accountable.
Yes.
That's cool.
They have included in this lawsuit the medical examiner, which was Dr. Galino.
Yeah.
The pathologist, which was Dr. Osborne. Some members of the police department. Some members of the Attorney General's office. I mean, they're going after everybody.
They're going all out.
And this lawsuit wanted to prove that there was a cover-up, but it also was asking for monetary compensation for all of the money that the Greenbergs had put into this. You mentioned earlier how this must have been crazy expensive. They basically spent their entire retirement trying to fight for justice for their daughter. They had spent close to $700,000 on these experts and legal fees and, just endless things that they were spending money on just to try to get these people to do their jobs.
Not only just do their jobs, just do the right thing.
Right.
I can accept if you're not good at your job, but don't do something wrong and dishonest to cover up the fact that you made a mistake professionally.
Yeah.
Come on.
Yeah, it's pretty crazy. So we're going to take a break from the lawsuits for a minute.
Ooh, I need a break. My goodness.
And go back to the investigation.
Okay, all right.
Which, as you remember, has been moved up the chain to the Pennsylvania District Attorney's Office. And the District Attorney was Josh Shapiro.
Okay.
Well, this YouTube investigator, Gavin Fish, finds a very interesting connection between Josh Shapiro and Sam Goldberg, Ellen's fiance's families.
Mm-hmm.
Both of their families are high up in the mainline Jewish community in Philadelphia. So Josh Shapiro actually went to high school at a prominent Jewish high school with Uncle Jimmy's daughter, Kim.
Oh.
Who would be Sam's cousin. And Josh and Kim also have daughters that are on the same basketball team. They're on the same volleyball team. There's pictures of them together at various events. And get this. Both Sam's parents, his Uncle Jimmy, and his cousin Kim have all donated to Josh Shapiro's campaigns in the past.
Immediate conflict of interest. Immediate conflict of interest. Like, honestly, if I'm looking at this case as a judge, which conveniently it's not going to be looked at as a case because it's a suicide. If I'm a judge and I see this, immediate mistrial.
Right.
Immediate mistrial.
So this gets out to the public, and Shapiro decides he's going to kick the case back to Philadelphia. He says to avoid the appearance of a conflict of interest.
Oh, okay.
He insists there is no conflict of interest, but he wants to avoid the appearance because he's such a good guy. So it goes back to Philadelphia, and they send it to Chester County. And there it has sat for the last 2 years.
Of course.
Until November of 2024. And finally, Chester County announced that they didn't have enough evidence to press charges for a criminal homicide. They're keeping the case open, but inactive. So for me, it wasn't really a win or a loss in my eyes.
Yeah.
Okay, but here is the bombshell that has happened recently, okay?
All right, let's do this.
In January of 2025, the Greenbergs' first case is still waiting to be heard by the Supreme Court. But their second lawsuit, the one for the cover-up and the monetary damages, is moving forward. And they're getting ready to do jury selection. The weekend before jury selection, Dr. Osborne signs a verification finally admitting that he thinks the case should be classified as something other than suicide. This entire time, he has been ride or die. This is what it should have been. A week before this case starts, which he himself would have had to testify at, he signs a verification saying, I think I made a mistake. I think that this should have been classified as something else.
Too late, buddy. Too late. You've gone this whole time. That seems like the last desperate gasp before drowning.
Right?
Like, oh my gosh.
So despite this, the jury selection appears like it's going to keep moving forward.
Yeah,
on Monday.
Of course.
They're going to, just because he's announced this, they're still going to go forward with the case. That is until the Greenberg's attorneys announce that both of the lawsuits have been settled. The one that was waiting for the Supreme Court and this one that they were doing jury selection for. They have both been settled. They have come to an agreement with the city, and the Greenbergs were paid a large sum of money. They did not say how much they were paid, but they did say in a press release that they have basically broken even as far as what they've spent on this. And the medical examiner's office has agreed to reevaluate the cause of death, also looking at all of this new evidence that they've collected over the years. So somebody asked their attorney in the press conference after this was announced, are you worried that they're going to review her cause of death and come back again and say it's still suicide? And he said, there's no way. With all of the new evidence, with this verification that Dr. Osborne has signed, there's no way that they're coming back and saying that it is suicide again. And after they have gotten that new cause of death, it's reckoning day. And they're going to start looking for the person/persons who are responsible for Ellen's death. And if I'm Sam Goldberg right now, I am pooping my pants.
For real.
Because he probably thought, okay, he has never been convicted of this, but I believe that he is responsible for this. And he probably thought he had gotten away with it. And now that they're reopening this opens the door.
It is open season, baby.
It is wide open. And as soon as her cause of death is amended, it's open season.
With all of the connections that they've made with the investigators that they have, the attorneys that they've made connections with, and how like much attention in the legal world this case has probably gotten, there is probably an attorney out there, some bulldog attorney out there that's going to be like, give it to me. I'll get this guy. Yeah. When that happens, it is going to be a blood bath.
Yeah. So after 14 long years, the search for justice for Ellen, it isn't really over yet, but this is a major step in the right direction. And I'm just going to give you guys my opinion of what happened really quickly. This is completely allegedly speculation. I believe that Ellen was in an abusive relationship.
Of course.
And I'm basing that off of the bruises that were on her body. I think that her anxiety that she was telling people was surrounding her job was actually about her relationship with Sam. I think she was maybe preparing to end things. And as we know from other domestic violence cases, that is the most dangerous time in those type of relationships, when somebody is preparing to end things and move on.
It's because it's the point at which the abuser knows that they're going to lose control and they have to exercise some more control.
Yes. And so I think that it was a case of, if I can't have you, then no one can. And I think that because Sam Goldberg had all of these big guns in his pocket, he's got Uncle Jimmy who's going to come fight his battles for him, I don't think he was that worried about it. This is completely my own opinion, complete speculation, but if I were betting on what happened in this case, that is what I would think happened. So, in any case,
it makes sense. I mean, it's still just boggling my mind, all of the cover-up stuff that we're revealing.
Yeah.
And that they decide, and there's no reason to end the case or settle the case out of court unless you know there's no way we're beating this.
Right. And none of this, sadly, is ever going to bring Ellen back, but I'm hopeful that finally finding some answers and holding the person or persons responsible of this horrific crime will finally bring her poor, sweet parents that have had to fight this battle for the last 14 years some semblance of peace. So I'm excited to see where this goes, and I want to give one final plug for Gavin Fish, because you can just search him up on YouTube. He is my one and only source for this case, and that is for good reason. It's because every single piece of evidence, every single court document, all of the 3D renderings that they did of her body, all of the security footage, the 911 call, everything is up on his page. And he does a fantastic job telling this story. I just tried to cram it all into 2 episodes, but he has a whole 17-part series. You can go down a real rabbit hole in this. There is so much more evidence that I haven't even covered just in the interest of time. But he is amazing at his job, and he actually also has some interviews with Ellen's parents about the case.
Wow.
Which were super interesting. Their reaction to all of the court rulings. So if you're interested in finding out more about this case, I would highly recommend going and checking him out on YouTube, because that is where I got all of my information. Patrick, any final thoughts on this?
No, I just want to give also, maybe I feel like if there's any point in which these 2 episodes reach her parents, we want to let you know that, like, we're so sorry for your loss, and we're so sorry that you had to fight a corrupt system like this. That's all that this feels like, is just pure corruption saving our own skins. And when it comes to a death of your child, it just, that's the last thing you think that you have to fight. The only thing that you want to have to worry about is grieving your child, making sure that they're buried properly. You don't think that you have to fight corruption and scandal. Like, right. And we're here for you. We support you if this ever gets to your ears, you know?
Exactly. Thank you for saying that. I could not agree more. I feel terribly for them, but I'm hopeful with this recent development in the case that things are going to move forward. And if there are any more updates, I will be sure to mention them on the podcast. I know we're all invested in this and rooting for Ellen, rooting for Ellen's parents, and just hoping that everything ends up the way it's supposed to. And with that, I'd love to hear your thoughts on this case. If you'll head over to my social media and let me know on my post. And if you have enjoyed this podcast, I would love if you could give me a 5-star review or become a subscriber. And with that, I guess we will see you next week. I will keep snooping so you don't have to. This is She Investigates and her husband signing off.